Have you ever felt like no matter what you do, you're always trying to win her over? But somehow, it only seems to push her further away. Like the harder you try, the colder she gets. Picture this. You send that long, thoughtful text, and she leaves you on read. You clear your schedule to see her, and she cancels last minute. Sound familiar? What if I told you the secret wasn't in trying harder, saying more, or doing more? What if the real power was in what you don't do, the invisible lines you draw that make her heart race, her respect grow, and her attraction toward you skyrocket? Today, I'm going to share with you 6 boundaries that men set, boundaries that not only command respect, but flip a switch deep inside a woman's mind and body. Boundaries that Neil Strauss, the master of understanding attraction, highlighted because they work. And by the end of this speech, you'll see why the man who sets these boundaries doesn't chase, because he doesn't need to. So stop whatever else you're doing, because what you're about to hear might just change the way you look at women, and yourself, forever. Now, let me be clear. Attraction isn't about being rich, tall, or having a jawline sharp enough to cut glass. Those things don't hurt, sure. But real, lasting attraction, the kind that makes a woman think about you at night, wonder about you when you're not around, and feel excited to earn your attention, comes from the way you carry yourself. It's about the standards you have, the lines you refuse to let others cross, the boundaries you set. And Neil Strauss, author of The Game, Rules of the Game, and one of the most studied minds in modern seduction, understood this better than most. The men who win, who naturally attract without trying so hard, have one thing in common: they set boundaries that show they respect themselves. And when a man respects himself, guess what, so do women. When I first heard about this idea of boundaries, I'll be honest, I didn't get it. I thought, boundaries, isn't that just pushing women away? Don't I need to do more, give more, be more available? I remember this one time there was this woman I was absolutely head over heels for. Let's call her Sophie. Sophie was beautiful, smart, and had this energy about her that just lit up a room. And when she gave me even a little bit of attention, I'd move mountains to be there. Cancel plans with friends, done. Stay up late waiting for a call, absolutely. Always be the one to text first. Of course, and at first, sure, she seemed flattered, but after a while I noticed something strange. The more I did, the less she seemed to care. She became distant, cold, flaky, and the harder I tried to pull her in, the more she pulled away. I was confused. Frustrated, I felt powerless. It wasn't until I stumbled on Neil Strauss's work and learned about the power of boundaries that everything changed. I started to shift, to set rules for myself, and what happened? The very same Sophie who once seemed out of reach started to lean in, to pursue. Here's the problem most men face. We're taught, whether by movies, society, or well-meaning advice, that if you want a woman to like you, you need to give. Give your time, give your attention, give gifts, give up your preferences, give up your plans, and while generosity is beautiful, neediness isn't. And there's a fine line between being generous and showing that you have no boundaries, because the truth is, a man without boundaries isn't attractive. He's easy, predictable, and in a world where women are constantly pursued, easy isn't exciting. Boundaries, on the other hand, communicate strength. They say, I have value, I respect myself, and if you want access to me, it has to mean something. Let's break down these 6 boundaries that, when set firmly, ignite attraction at a deep level. 1. The boundary of self. Priority. The first boundary: you come first. This doesn't mean you're selfish. It means you don't sacrifice your goals, your health, your passions, or your happiness just to please a woman. Neil Strauss talks about how men on their purpose are the most magnetic. A man who values his mission over a woman's whims signals that he's got direction. And women find that irresistible. Think about it. When you skip the gym because she calls last minute. When you abandon a work project because she wants to hang out. You're telling her that your life bends around hers. And the more you do that, the more she loses respect. Instead, let her fit into your life. Keep your commitments to yourself first. And you'll notice she'll start valuing the time you do give. 2. The boundary of emotional control. Here's a boundary that separates boys from men. Never let someone else control your emotions. Picture this. She tests you, shows up late, cancels last minute, flirts with another guy in front of you. How do you react? The man without boundaries, he gets angry, jealous, needy. Maybe he snaps or sulks or tries to argue his way back into her good graces. But the man with emotional boundaries, he stays calm, unmoved. Why? Because his emotional state isn't dependent on external chaos. Women will test you. It's not malicious, it's instinct. But when you show that you're the rock in the storm, that you don't rise and fall with every little thing, that's when she feels safest and most drawn to you. 3. The boundary of time. Your time is precious. The man who sets this boundary makes sure that time spent with him is valuable and not taken for granted. How many times have you rearranged your entire day just because she asked? The man with boundaries doesn't drop everything on a whim. He values his schedule, and when he gives you time, it's a gift, not an obligation. Neil Strauss points out that women want to feel like they've earned your attention. When you make your time too easily available, it loses value. But when it's rare, when it's earned, it becomes priceless. 4. The boundary of standards. This one's big. The man with boundaries has standards, and he enforces them. What kind of behavior do you accept? What kind of language, tone, respect? A man without standards lets disrespect slide. He laughs off rude comments. He tolerates flakiness. But the man with standards, he calls it out, not with anger, not with drama, but with calm certainty. For example, if she's constantly late, you don't scold or beg. You simply say, I value punctuality. If this keeps happening, we won't be able to spend time together. And then follow through. This tells her you're not desperate, you have options, and you won't lower your standards just to keep someone around. 5. The boundary of physical space. The man with boundaries knows how to protect his physical space. This means not tolerating unwanted touch, not allowing someone to invade your personal space in ways that feel uncomfortable. But it also means pacing physical intimacy, not rushing, not giving in just because the opportunity is there. When you set the pace, when you don't rush intimacy or let her dictate it entirely, you build tension. And tension builds attraction. Neil Strauss talks about this idea of being the prize, and part of being the prize. You don't just give yourself away, you let desire build. You let her wonder, does he want me? 6. The boundary of words. Finally, the man with boundaries chooses his words carefully and expects the same. He doesn't engage in endless arguments. He doesn't let himself be spoken to disrespectfully. He doesn't overshare or spill his heart out too soon, hoping for validation. Instead, he listens more than he talks, and when he speaks, his words carry weight. He communicates clearly, directly, and with purpose. And what does that do? It creates an air of mystery, a sense of authority, and it makes what he says, and who he is, more powerful. If you like, I can continue with part 2, deep dive into each boundary with examples. How to set them in real life, common mistakes men make, and how women respond. This will help us build toward the 4,000-word goal in an engaging, story-driven way. The boundary of self, priority, real story. Let me take you back to a moment when this boundary made all the difference. I had a friend, let's call him Alex. Alex was a good guy, smart, funny, successful, but when it came to women, he'd lose himself. There was this one woman, Emma, that he was crazy about. And every time she called, no matter what he was doing, he dropped it. I remember one time we were at the final meeting for a startup pitch. This was months of work, and it was crunch time. His phone buzzed. It was her. She wanted to grab coffee, and without a second thought, Alex left. He left the meeting, left the team, left the opportunity, and guess what? Emma didn't see him as more desirable. She saw him as easy, as a man who would abandon his own priorities at her whim, and eventually she lost interest. Now contrast that with a man who says, I'd love to see you, but I've got something important I'm working on right now. How about tomorrow at 6? What happens? Suddenly, you are the one she's adjusting for. Suddenly, your time matters. Neil Strauss teaches that the man who stays on his mission draws people, including women, toward him. He's not bending over backward to fit into her world. He's inviting her into his. The boundary of emotional control, the calm in the storm. Picture this. You're out with a woman. Everything's going great, and suddenly she flirts with the bartender, or laughs a little too hard at another guy's joke. The boundary, less man, he reacts, he gets tense. Maybe he tries to one-up the other guy. Maybe he sulks or lashes out later, saying, "Why were you doing that?" The man with emotional boundaries. He doesn't flinch. Maybe he smiles. Maybe he turns his attention to something else. Maybe he simply enjoys the night without letting insecurity take over. And you know what happens. She notices. She feels that you're unshaken, and instead of focusing on that other guy, her attention snaps back to you. Because you're the one who stayed grounded. Women test boundaries not because they're cruel, but because they want to feel safe with a man who won't be rocked by every breeze. Neil Strauss talks about this in The Game. Emotional self-control is what makes you the anchor in her storm. The boundary of time. Make it valuable. Let's talk about a classic mistake. Over-availability. Ever had a woman text you at 10 p.m. saying, "What are you up to?" and without thinking you reply, "Nothing, just chilling, want to hang out," and you think you're being cool. You think you're being easygoing, but what's really happening? You're signaling that your time isn't valuable, that it's up for grabs at any hour, and what's easy to get is easy to take for granted. The man with boundaries. He doesn't jump at every late-night message. He doesn't rearrange his whole life because she got bored and thought of him at the last second. He might reply, "I'm heading to bed soon. Let's plan something for this weekend." Suddenly, the dynamic shifts. You're not the filler plan. You're the main event she looks forward to. The boundary of standards enforcement is everything. Here's where most guys fail. They say they have standards, but they don't enforce them. You might say, "I don't tolerate disrespect." But then she shows up an hour late without a heads up, and you act like it's no big deal. You might say, "I want honesty," but then she lies about something small, and you let it slide. A man with true standards doesn't need to yell, guilt trip, or argue. He simply lets his actions speak. If she's late repeatedly, he stops making plans. If she's dishonest, he distances himself, and what happens? She realizes that your standards mean something, and that makes you different from most men. And what's rare is valuable. Neil Strauss emphasized this over and over. Women are drawn to men who know what they want and aren't afraid to walk away if they don't get it. The boundary of physical space, the power of restraint. Let's flip the script for a second. Most guys think attraction is about how quickly you can escalate, how fast you can move things forward. But here's the truth. The man with boundaries doesn't rush. He doesn't push. He doesn't need to. I remember one guy in Neil's stories, let's call him Tyler. Tyler would be at a party, and women would literally try to pull him closer. Why? Because he wasn't chasing, he wasn't grabbing, he wasn't rushing intimacy, he was comfortable in his space. Comfortable in letting things unfold naturally. By not trying to close every interaction, he let tension build. And tension is the heartbeat of attraction. The boundary of words, speak less, mean more. There's an old saying, the man who speaks less controls the conversation. And this boundary is about just that. A man with boundaries doesn't overshare his life story in the first 10 minutes. He doesn't spill his heart out on date one. He doesn't try to talk her into liking him. Instead, he lets silence do some of the work. He asks thoughtful questions, he listens, and when he does speak, it's with intention, and this creates mystery. Depth. Women don't walk away thinking, "Well, I know everything about him." They walk away thinking, "I want to know more." And that keeps them coming back. Common mistakes men make when trying to set boundaries. One, setting boundaries out of anger. A boundary isn't about punishing or controlling someone. It's about protecting your own well-being. If you're setting boundaries just to get a reaction, it's not a boundary. It's manipulation, failing to follow through. If you say, "I won't tolerate lateness," but keep seeing someone who's always late, your boundary means nothing. Your actions must back your words. 3. Over-explaining. You don't need to justify your boundaries. You don't need to write an essay about why you won't tolerate disrespect. A simple, calm statement is enough. 4. Being rigid instead of firm. Boundaries aren't about being controlling. They're about having self-respect. Be firm, but not inflexible. Know what really matters and let go of the small stuff. How women respond when you set boundaries. This is where the magic happens. When you set boundaries, she feels more attracted because she sees you as strong and grounded. She feels safer because you're showing that you won't let her or anyone else walk over you. She starts to pursue because attention from you means something. She respects you because you respect yourself. Neil Strauss's teachings are full of examples where men who set boundaries found that the dynamic shifted. Women started investing more, chasing more, valuing more because those boundaries signaled worth. So here's my challenge to you, starting today, pick just one boundary. Maybe it's your time, maybe it's emotional control, maybe it's refusing to let disrespect slide. Draw that line. Hold it firm and watch what happens. You'll notice something powerful. Women will start to see you differently. People in general will. And more importantly, you'll start to see yourself differently. Because boundaries aren't just about attraction. They're about becoming the man you were always meant to be. So I'll leave you with this. The only thing standing between you and the kind of connection you want is the courage to set boundaries. Boundaries tell the world who you are. They tell women, I'm worth it. And when you believe that, so does she. Don't be the man who bends until he breaks. Be the man who stands tall, who lives by his values, and who draws people in not because he chases, but because he leads. Let me share a story about a man I met at a Neil Strauss seminar. Let's call him Jason. Jason wasn't what you'd call conventionally attractive. He wasn't tall, didn't have movie star looks, didn't drive a fancy car, but the room changed when he walked in. Women noticed him, men respected him, and it wasn't because of his looks or his money. It was because of his boundaries. One night, after the seminar, we all went to this rooftop lounge. There was this stunning woman at the bar. Confident, stylish, the kind of woman that makes heads turn. She was used to being chased, used to men buying her drinks, showering her with attention. Jason walked over, not with a line, not with some over-rehearsed opener, but with presence. Calm, self-assured, they talked. She tested him right away. Playful teasing, saying, "Oh, are you going to buy me a drink?" Most guys would have rushed to say yes. Jason, he smiled and said, "If I bought you a drink, I wouldn't know if you were here for me or the free whiskey. Let's see if we vibe first." Boom. That was it. No game. Playing. No neediness. Just a man holding his standard, his boundary. And guess what? Instead of getting offended, she laughed. She leaned in closer. And by the end of the night, she was the one offering to buy him a drink. That's the power of boundaries in seduction. You flip the dynamic, you stop chasing, and you let her choose you because now she sees you as worth choosing. How to practice boundaries. 5 daily exercises now. You might be thinking, okay, I get it. But how do I actually build these boundaries? How do I make this real? Let's break it down. 1. Start small. You don't have to overhaul your life overnight. Pick one simple boundary. Maybe it's not replying to texts instantly. Maybe it's saying no to one thing that doesn't serve you today. Each time you do it, you build your boundary muscle. 2. Reflect on your values. Boundaries come from knowing what matters to you. What do you value? Respect, honesty, punctuality. Once you know, it becomes easier to set lines that protect those values. 3. Pause before you react. When you feel tempted to bend a boundary, pause, breathe, ask yourself, if I had high self-respect, what would I do here? Then act from that place. 4. Enforce without drama. Remember, boundaries don't need to come with explanations, arguments, or guilt trips. A calm that doesn't work for me is powerful. 5. Surround yourself with support. If you're around people who constantly push your boundaries or mock your growth, it's harder to stay strong. Surround yourself with those who respect your lines, or better yet, inspire you to set stronger ones. Why boundaries are magnetic to women. Let's pull back for a second. Why do boundaries attract women on such a deep level? Here's the secret. Boundaries signal emotional strength. Women are drawn to men who can handle life's storms without falling apart. Boundaries show you've got that strength. Boundaries create mystery and challenge. If you're not always available, if you're not always yes, 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 you create space for desire to grow. Boundaries build respect first, and attraction follows. A woman can't truly be attracted to a man she doesn't respect. Boundaries earn that respect. Boundaries show you are the prize, and when you act like the prize, you become it. Another real story. When I finally set boundaries, let me share something personal. There was a time I thought saying yes was the way to win a woman's heart. That bending, adjusting, and pleasing was the key to attraction. And for years, I kept finding myself in the same place. Frustrated, unappreciated, chasing. Then I decided to change. I remember the first time I really enforced a boundary. A woman I was dating at the time, let's call her Lee, would always cancel last minute. I'd feel disappointed, but I'd hide it, hoping she'd appreciate how understanding I was. Finally, I had enough. The next time she canceled, I didn't argue. I didn't guilt trip. I simply said, I'm looking for someone who values time the way I do. Let's take some space. And what happened? She was shocked, then curious, then apologetic. And for the first time, she started valuing my time because I did. That was the moment I realized boundaries don't push people away. They bring the right people closer. Your boundaries, your power. Here's what I want you to take away from all of this. The man who sets boundaries isn't just more attractive to women. He's more powerful in every part of life. He commands respect in business, with friends, and most importantly, with himself. Every boundary you set is like a brick in the foundation of a stronger, happier, more confident you. And remember, this isn't about playing games or being hard to get. It's about being real. It's about honoring your time, your energy, your heart. Neil Strauss didn't become one of the most sought-after voices in seduction because he taught tricks. He became that because he understood the deeper truth. Attraction starts with self-respect. So tonight, I want you to do something simple. Before you sleep, write down one boundary you're going to set starting tomorrow. Maybe it's, I won't cancel my plans last minute just because someone texts me. I'll wait before replying to texts instead of always being instant. I'll speak up if someone crosses a line. Write it down. Say it out loud and then live it, because I promise you this. When you start setting boundaries, you'll see a shift. Not just in how women see you, but in how you see you. You'll walk taller, speak clearer, feel stronger. And that confidence, that's what truly draws people in. I'll leave you with one last thought. Every man faces a choice. You can be the man who bends, who pleases, who chases, and keeps wondering why attraction slips away. Or you can be the man who stands firm, who knows his worth, who draws people in not by chasing, but by leading. Neil Strauss showed us that boundaries aren't walls that keep people out. They're doors that let the right people in. So, my question for you is this. What boundary will you set today that changes everything tomorrow? Because the only thing standing between you and the life, the love, the respect you want, is the courage to draw the line. And once you do, everything changes. Thank you.